Okay, we're live. Everyone, welcome back to our second Blooming with Conversation. Marina and I are so excited again. Can you hear feedback right now? That was
No, but there was, like, a portion where I couldn't hear you for a moment.
okay. Well, we'll just keep going with the flow. Welcome everyone to our second Blooming with Conversation. I'm back with Marina today. Last time we met, we talked about a lot of different things. We kind of got into the roots and the nitty-gritty of the 4 self-healing skills, for sensitive self-healers, and we introduced Marina's new circle inside the community. And we're back today for a new topic that is something that Marina has been experiencing in her life recently and writing about, and that is learning how to stand up for ourselves as sensitive people, how to set boundaries, how to channel our anger in healthy ways so that we can set boundaries, and how to have self compassion for ourselves in that process. For those who are new to this conversational series, Blooming with Conversations is a biweekly conversational series that we host here on Substack. And the goal here is to bring sensitive leaders together to talk about interesting topics that help us thrive and grow in our sensitivity. So, without further ado, Marina, do you want to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I'm really excited to be here because we had so much fun last time we did this, so it's cool to get some momentum going and do another conversation. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Marina. I started my business, Cosmic Marina, 3 years ago now, and my main goal in my business is to support sensitive folks, through coaching, through oracle services, and yeah, just to hold space and guide people throughout their transformation, whether or not that's, self-development or working with their intuitive gifts and just learning how to thrive as a sensitive person. So, yeah, a big part of that is boundaries, and I am learning that live, so I am excited to just share what I'm learning and, yeah, hopefully everyone listening will get something valuable out of this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for introducing yourself, Marina. And for those who are just joining us, our questions for today that we're going to be exploring in this conversation are really just looking at why standing up for ourselves can be so dysregulating as sensitive people, and then exploring how do we advocate for ourselves in a way that feels safe and grounded, and how can we become more skilled at standing up for ourselves, standing in our power, and really just asserting our right to peace and nourishment and all the good things. So, Marina, to open up our conversation, can you kind of take us into your personal relationship with anger and boundaries and how that's been like for you throughout your life as a sensitive person?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, it feels like a loaded question, but I'm excited. Um, yeah, I guess we'll start with boundaries. I didn't really even know what boundaries were most of my life. I think as a teenager, I was definitely what you would call a people pleaser, where I just sort of wanted to fly under the radar, didn't want to like rock the boat at all, didn't want to make waves, and I think I just did my best to survive, and by survive, I just mean, like, keep my nervous system calm, try not to get rejected by people, try not to end up in a situation where I would need to set boundaries. Um, a lot of times I would end up apologizing for things that I had no business apologizing for, um, and had a hard time saying no, definitely, and over the past few years, I feel like I've really started to get it down, the whole boundary thing, saying no. I almost don't even recognize myself sometimes. Still learning, still growing in that department. But yeah, I've recently had experiences where I'm like, wow, I handled this so differently than I would have in the past. Um, and yeah, in terms of emotions and especially anger, I feel like anger is the more challenging emotion for me. Growing up, I think anger was, a bad emotion is kind of how I perceived it, when I saw people that were having angry outbursts, I was like, wow, they have no self-control, they're causing harm. And I just sort of like wrapped all those things together in this story of what anger is. And yeah, since then I've definitely my view of anger has changed so much, and it's something now it's an emotion that I really honor and I'm so grateful for. So yeah, a lot has changed in that department for me.
Hmm. I wanna get more into the nitty-gritty around anger and how this all has played out in your story and how you've kind of worked through this. But
Mhm.
first, I wanna name some of the pain points for our listeners because it wouldn't be so hard to advocate for ourselves or stand up for ourselves in situations if it didn't bring up a lot in our nervous system. One of the reasons that it's so hard, it's not just a mental problem where you have to, like, work through how to address a conflict, it's also an embodiment thing.
Yeah.
Because what tends to happen when you're sensitive and you're in a position where you're in some sort of conflict or you need to set a boundary or you need to stand up for or advocate for yourself, that can create a lot of fear and turmoil and stress inside our nervous system. So we can go into a nervous system stress response, either a freeze response where we kind of like lock up and we don't know what to say. I would say that's probably my tendency when somebody is coming at me. I tend to just kind of like turn into a possum and just like roll over. There's also the fawn response, which Marina was kind of touching on with the people pleasing. So going into like managing someone else's nervous system so that you can comfort yourself. And actually, this is bringing up a memory between you, Marina. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So maybe
Yeah.
we'll that we have Marina and I have had conflicts in our friendship that we've had to work through, and there was one in particular where we had we had a conflict that was, like, not a big deal, but Marina was still working through, like, kinda that fawning with me, and yeah, that was a big turning point on both of our journeys, so we'll come back to that. Um, and then there's also the collapse response where you spiral, maybe you go fall into shame when you're faced with a conflict or something that you need to set a boundary around, and that can be really tough. Um, when we have these stress responses around conflict as sensitive people, you can really feel it. So you might have a racing heart, you might be trembly or nauseous, you might even, if it's really overwhelming for you to stand up for yourself and dissociate partly and just, like, kinda, like, leave the room. It can also bring up a lot of shame emotionally, like, you don't want to speak up for yourself or take up space when you're faced with a conflict. You might feel that urge to over-explain or apologize because you don't wanna be perceived as mean or dramatic or too sensitive or too much in any way. Um and over time, these these physical reactions that we have to conflict can really affect us and can wear down our self-esteem, our self-worth. We can turn that anger in on ourselves instead of using it to protect ourselves. So I just want to validate the sensitive experience deeply here. That it's not easy for us the way that it can be for less sensitive people because our bodies really do often have this full bore nervous system response to standing up for ourselves if we're not practiced at it. Is there anything you would add to that, Marina?
Yeah, I think, um, well, first of all, very well said, and I feel like those are definitely things that I can that resonate with me as well. Um, I think also sensitive people have this capacity to feel so many different things at once. Um, you know, recently in situations that I've been dealing with, I felt like I was feeling for the other person at the same time, feeling my own emotions, then also kind of like intuiting how are they feeling, what is this experience like for them? So it's so layered, and just this wide capacity to feel so many different emotions at once. And I think that can get really confusing because, one moment you might be feeling angry, and the same moment you might also be feeling empathy for the person who's making you angry.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot to sort through, and I also find a lot of sensitive folks need time to digest before making decisions. So, if there's some sort of conflict or interaction with someone, right, where maybe they say something and it makes you feel a certain way, you don't always know what to say in that moment. And I think that can be really hard to not know how you want to act or what you want to say in that moment
Mhm.
because you're someone who needs to take that information, take those 7 different emotions you're feeling, go home, sit with them, sleep on,
Yeah.
and then the next day, like, react, right? And that's just not how society expects us to handle these confrontations, right? We're not really used to that. Like, say you say something to me and I'm upset, it's a little strange, a little different for me to be like, "Leah, I don't really know how I feel about what you just said, but I'm gonna take it home, I'm gonna think about it, and I'll get back to you." But we're allowed to do that, you know? Like, you have permission to sit on it, to feel your emotions, to let them process and digest, and then to come back to it. Of course, not every situation is like that. Sometimes you have to kind of think on your feet and just go with your gut in that moment. But yeah, there's a lot to process sometimes, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the depth of processing, and I like how you named the need for a lot of space to process big experiences, especially conflict. Um, and also just naming, like, it's okay to set a boundary in the moment to protect your need for that space and to protect your need for just time to process what's going on. And this is bringing me back to the example we were talking about earlier. I remember when we had our conflict back then, we kind of just needed to like take some space from it because we we both got triggered. We were both triggered. Um, you you were kind of in the fawn response. I was kind of in like the shutdown, and we were trying to resolve it with each other, but we finally realized like this isn't helping right now. We're not going to resolve this right now. And I don't think that scenario necessarily required any of us to stand up for ourselves. It was more just like a friendship conflict. Um, what would you say is like an example of more of a conflict where you would need to take a stand or set a more firm boundary in the moment? And how would you do that?
Yeah, well, I'll share an example from my life recently. This is, kind of what I alluded to earlier, where I realized how far I've come. I had a situation recently where I provided services for someone and kind of in good faith, was like, okay, you can pay me after the services are rendered. My mistake. And they didn't pay me, and that was such a strange experience. I've been in business for 3 years now, I haven't really had to deal with that. So it was a very, like, it was a new experience where I was like, "Oh my gosh, I really need to stand up for myself in this scenario." Yeah, and it got complicated, and it really took a lot of mental gymnastics for me to there were times where I was like, what's really going on here? Like, is there something I need to be accountable for? I tend to be like over accountable at times. Um, and so that can make me doubt myself where I'm like, you know, maybe they're right. Like maybe I'm in the wrong. And I think that's where the people pleaser comes in, where it's just, sometimes you're just not used to standing up for yourself, or trusting yourself and trusting your, um, intuition too, like, and that's why I love emotions so much because emotions often know when a boundary has been crossed. You know,
Mhm.
that feeling of like, I feel like my power has been taken because I didn't get paid for this time, for my energy. Um, and so, yeah, listening to that emotion of like, oh, my boundary has been crossed. Now I need to take a stand and, what the situation is will depend on how you stand up for yourself. So it really depends on what's going on.
Mhm. And I wanna name because I definitely saw the growth in you in this situation. Marina was in our group chat, celebrating that she was setting a boundary with this person and just being in her power and saying, like, this is my policy. This is how I'm going to handle this situation, and saying, it's unacceptable that you're not going to pay me. And I just was witnessing her and her power and just saying, like, round of applause, because the Marina that I knew even just 2 years ago would have had a really hard time with that. Um, and I'm wondering if you can reflect on that a little bit. Like, what would baby business Marina have done if she were faced with that situation 2 years ago before she's done all her boundary work?
Oh my god. She would have been like I mean, I think she would have tried, right? Because I do love myself and I want to protect myself, protect my boundaries, but I think in the past, I would have really beat myself up about the situation, because, I had made a mistake when I was there, and it was a forgivable mistake, and she even forgave me in the moment and was like, "Oh, it's fine, no big deal, not a problem at all," and then, a day later, things changed, and she was like, "Actually, I'm not paying you for this thing." So I think in the past, I would have been like, "Well, I made a mistake, so
Mm,
you get paid." It's like, no, that is not how that works. Like, you know, everyone's policies are different, but my clients don't decide if I get paid based on my services, you know what I mean? And, like, they're not the judge of me, and they're not like, "Well, you weren't perfect, so you don't get paid." And, I see that clearly now because I've done a lot of inner work, but past me would have been, like, um, really hard on herself, and I think she set impossible standards for herself, so when people used that sort of idea of perfection against her, she was like, "Yeah, you're right. I'm not perfect, so I don't deserve this, this, and this." So it's
mhm,
like a self-esteem thing, I think, for me at least. I think everyone has different challenges with boundaries. Sometimes it is the physical aspect of setting boundaries. That sometimes that's the hurdle for someone, just the physical, like you said, that nervous system activation. I think for past me, it was like a little bit of self-esteem and stuff like that. And also I loved the photo you put in our group chat, which was the what did it say? It was like in my villain era,
yeah.
setting healthy boundaries. Like, it is this feeling of like, am I being bad? Like, am I allowed to do this? Am I like in my villain era? And it's like, actually, no, you're just like doing what's healthy and what is like what you should be doing, you know?
Mhm.
Um, but it feels weird if you're not used to it. So,
Right, that's a good point. It's like when we've been on a kind of a self-work, self-development journey, healing journey, whatever you wanna call it, for a while, we go through these phases where we get better at the skill that we're practicing, but when we first do it, it's like a muscle that we haven't really stretched or worked, and it can be so overwhelming, ungrounding. But eventually you get to a point where you look back and you're like, you can have so much compassion for your younger self because you can see more clearly why it's been such a struggle. Uh, I kind of want to like tease apart the dynamics, maybe not of this exact situation, but it can be so subtle. Like what you were talking about earlier when you were saying how somebody can pick on your kind of perfectionism, like they can kind of leverage that or manipulate that to get you thinking that you don't deserve something, or kind of, yeah, confuse you around what your right is in that situation.
mm,
So how would you say, like, if you're a sensitive person and you're very vulnerable to people leveraging your I don't wanna say weaknesses, but, like, leveraging your growth edges,
mhm.
against you, how do you stay grounded in those situations and, like, stay in your power so that you can, protect yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Um, I think sitting with situations long enough to see clearly what's going on, right? So, in this situation, a lot of times your initial reaction, what your mind is saying, is usually fear based.
Mhm.
And so I think listening to that voice will give you a good example of you're trauma, your childhood self, your fearful self, your ego self, those very fast paced and seemingly urgent narratives are often the ones that are wounded. And so listening to them and what they have to say, I think is very telling, but not letting them run the show, right? And the same goes for emotions. Sometimes emotions will cause us to want to be impulsive and to react. And usually those reactions are based, you know, they're not always grounded in truth. Um, they're true in that, it's a valid experience, it's a true experience, but
Mhm.
they might be reacting to a story or a belief that isn't necessarily true. So I think giving yourself enough time to sit with the sort of anxiety or the fear or the emotions, um, and then once the fog has cleared, to really dissect what's going on, right? And so for me, this is often just kind of being a detective about the situation. Like, okay, what happened? What are they saying is happening for them? Is there truth to that? Do I believe what they're saying or do I think something else? Um, a lot of times too, I think going to friends and people who will be honest with you, right? Not just people who are going to tell you what you want to hear, because a lot of times, we all have that friend that's like, screw them, I can't believe they did that, da da da.
Yeah.
That you want to go to that friend who's grounded and centered, and they're not going to be afraid to say, well, this did happen, and maybe this is a growth opportunity for you, but they're also gonna tell you, like, "Hey, I think, in this case, you're being taken advantage of," right? That friend who's gonna stick up for you and look out for you, and when you're not setting those boundaries to help you set them. Um, I'm trying to be this for other people. It's actually kind of challenging for me because I don't wanna tell people what to do. Again, another, like, I guess another sensitive trait, but I someone close to me has been sharing, about their dating life and stuff like that, and I don't wanna get too involved, I just want to let them live their life, but there's been a couple men who have said or done things and I'm like, "Look, it's your business, do what you want, but, like, I'm getting a weird feeling about this person. I feel like they're kinda taking advantage. I feel like you deserve better." And so, yeah, we all need those people, and I want to be one of those people as well. We should all be helping each other set boundaries because sometimes you're too close to it to, like, see clearly, and having that person, who's on the sidelines help you to see clearly can be really powerful. Definitely.
Mhm. Yeah, I want to circle us back to anger, because you've just described how to stand up for yourself and how to advocate for yourself when you have separated yourself from the conflict, and how to kind of support yourself through that, whether it's talking to friends or just giving yourself space. But when you're in the heat of the moment and somebody is really challenging you, um, the often the first sign that a boundary is being crossed or somebody is challenging us is that anger. Um, and if you are used to kind of silencing that part of yourself, the part of yourself that feels that boundary cross and feels anger come up for them or frustration, there's different sort of forms of anger. It's not always like screaming and pulling your hair out. That's more like rage. Uh, One of our favorite books that Marina and I have used in various settings is The Language of Emotions by Carla McLaren, and she talks about how all emotions have soft, medium, and intense versions of themselves. So, soft anger can be like irritability or frustration. Medium anger can be like you're aggravated or you are offended. And then intense anger can be like rage, right? So we wanna get really good at sort of noticing that early anger, that soft anger, when we are working on standing up for ourselves and setting healthy boundaries to protect ourselves.
Mhm.
Um, and this is tough because, like Marina was saying earlier, as sensitive people with high empathy, and we tend to have a lot of heart and compassion and empathy for other people in conflicts, we can start to think of that emotion as a bad emotion rather than what it really is, which is a signal of our boundaries. a signal of what separates my power or my rights from yours.
Mhm.
Uh, you kind of think of anger as like a piece of information protector that shows you when a line has been crossed. And there's a difference too between feeling anger and acting from anger, right? So, like, if you notice that you're feeling anger towards a situation, like in Marina's case, where a client was refusing to pay her, you're feeling that anger, but that doesn't mean you just start yelling at them or sending an angry email or what have you. You don't have to act from anger, but you do have to feel it, and you have to sit with that feeling and notice, like, okay, this is clearly like a line is being either pushed or crossed right now. So now I'm gonna sit with that and figure out how do I respond in a way that protects me? Not reactively, like, we don't wanna use our anger like a flamethrower. We wanna use our anger like a shield, like a soft shield that helps keep other people's stuff away from us. Um, so my question for you, Marina, is what would you like, how would you help someone who is having a hard time feeling or getting in contact with their anger? And what steps would you guide them through to help them use that more constructively?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I just noticed my battery's low, so I'm gonna grab my charger real quick, and then, I'll answer your question, and maybe in the meantime, if there's anything else you wanna share with the group or, if you have any favorite practices, you could share that. I'll be right back. Just don't
Okay.
wanna lose you.
Yeah, no worries. We need some like waiting room music, like do do
Need
do.
a petition.
I don't know. I can't see who's watching right now. I think we have one person watching. I can't see your name, but if you can hear me, hello, welcome. We are talking about self-advocacy and standing up for ourselves, standing in our power as sensitive people. And this is our second Blooming with conversation. This is a conversational series where I sit down with sensitive leaders to talk about various topics that help us thrive in our sensitivity. So, yeah, that's what we're getting into today. And Three, welcome back.
We're recharging the phone.
We're still working through our technical things with this twice a week or every other week series.
I'm just glad I noticed so that I didn't just randomly drop off.
I'm just like, oh no, I'm left all alone here.
Alright.
Um,
Would you wanna say the question again?
yeah, so we're getting into anger and trying to tease apart how we can if you're meeting with a client who has a hard time staying in contact with their anger or even feeling it in a safe way, what are the steps you would lead them to help them um, feel their anger and use it as a way to protect themselves?
Yeah, great question. I think I would first ask, if they have any idea, if they have any thoughts on why it's challenging for them to sit with. I think for some people, it's the physical aspect, right? Like just the way that you feel in your body can be really uncomfortable. So there is a tendency to dissociate from the body and to sort of check out. And that's a way of dealing with overwhelm. It's a completely normal way to deal with the overwhelm of the feelings in the body. But it's also possible that it's their concept of anger, right? Some people have an idea. I would say most people have an idea that anger means something about them, right? It's this kind of stereotype of, if I'm angry, then I am this kind of person. Um, so I think knowing which of the two is more powerful for them and which is holding them back more from their anger is helpful. Um, if it's the physical aspect, I would say that's the quickest to deal with because it just takes some mindfulness, honestly. Um, for me, that looks like noticing what's most uncomfortable in my body. And it can be challenging to do, right? Sometimes it's your heart. Like your heart is just racing and racing and racing. And it can be a little bit scary to tune in with the heart. You know, so learning how to hold compassionate space for your body is very important. How to notice, wow, my heart's racing, but nothing bad is happening.
Mhm.
It the heart racing gives you this idea that something bad is happening, but that's just because you're in fight or flight. Something about the situation that made you angry caused your body to say there's a threat. So just reminding yourself, wow, my body's doing what it's supposed to. My body knows there's a threat, right? And so awesome. I'm alive. I'm healthy. My heart is doing what it's supposed to. My nervous system is doing what it's supposed to. And it's just kind of talking to yourself in that way to remind yourself that nothing bad's actually going to happen, that you're safe. Um, Noticing the breathing, things like that as well. And then if it's more about the story, that takes a little bit more work, right? Because then we're doing some shadow work. We're doing some journaling. We are exploring those stories and those beliefs, and we're deciding, do I still believe this? Do I
Mm,
really think it's true that people that are angry are bad or, whatever the story is? And also, where did that story start? That can be really helpful. Like, oh, this early experience kind of created this story and I'm still believing it, and I haven't questioned it until now.
mhm. I wanna go into some of the nitty-gritty around anger because 'cause I've just pulled up Carla McLaren's page on this, and she's the expert, so I'm just gonna kinda read.
444, by the way, if you're on the East Coast.
So the one of the questions she puts forward is, "What is anger and where does it come from?" Um, so anger is an emotion, it comes from within you, and its job every emotion has some sort of job or gift or like an action potential that it's helping us fulfill. So the job of anger is to help you set and maintain effective interpersonal boundaries around the things and the ideas that you value. So that's an interesting definition, right? If you let's kind of use your example. So what value of yours you felt like got violated when a client refused to pay you?
Mm, multiple values. One was honesty. That was the first one because she told me it wasn't a problem, when I was there and that everything was great and fine.
Mhm.
So, I feel like she had lied, like she hadn't been honest. I don't know the reasons, right? Maybe she just didn't know how she felt in the moment, and that's fine. Um, but honesty is very important to me. Clear communication. She ghosted me for weeks before I finally got a hold of her. Um, and so that really was one of the things that made me angry was not communicating clearly with me. Like, I really appreciate it when people just tell me straight up what's going on. I don't wanna have to guess. Um, and then, of course, my time and my energy, right? I feel like that's the number 1 in this situation is I expect to get paid for my time and my energy, especially when we have an agreement around that.
Right, right. So it can become a little bit easier to set boundaries and stand up for yourself and be able to use your anger constructively when you know what you value.
Mhm,
So that's something that you might wanna do before you start working with anger is start getting really clear on your own values. For me, I also value honesty very highly. So if somebody is being dishonest with me, I get pretty angry. And I haven't struggled as much in this area. I've always been kind of like a natural advocate. I was like the friend growing up who would like defend my sensitive friends and like go against the bullies. Like I didn't have that kind of fear or difficulty tapping into my anger. Um, but I have struggled with self-advocacy around my values until I knew what my values were.
mhm,
Another thing that can trigger my anger is when people are infringing on my freedom. Oof, that's a big one for me, and it comes up a lot with jobs. Like if a boss is overly demanding, or they're asking me to stay late, or they're just being, yeah, infringing on my value of my personal freedom and my personal autonomy. That's where I can feel that anger and know that I need to set a boundary.
mhm,
So for those listening, do some work around your values. And this is a conversation we'll continue to have. It's an element in my framework, value alignment. There are lists you can find online of just values lists and tests and quizzes. So I'd very much encourage you to do that. Um, yeah.
I have an idea. So, what if you could sit down and you can write what are some things I've gotten angry about recently?
Mm.
and just write, like, maybe 3 or 4, I don't know, however many you can come up with, and then try to figure out what value is this related to? And then that's a great way to understand, like, it's almost like a backwards way of doing it, of, "Oh, thank you, anger, for showing me what I value," and then you have, like, a list of your values.
Yeah, and then you could even map that to what boundary would I set if I ever face the situation again?
Mhm,
And how would I uphold my own values in the situation?
mhm,
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I also think this is helpful to think of it in terms of our values because then that makes it very clear that it's not about the other person. It's about us. It's about what matters to us. And it's about protecting what matters to us, and kind of creating that separation of like it's the other person's responsibility to act in alignment with their values.
mhm,
Um, so something else I want to mention from Carla's website, she talks about, she kind of like emotions down into what gifts they carry when we're able to use and feel these emotions intelligently, what they do for us, what we need to do when that feeling is triggered, and the internal questions that we want to ask ourselves around this feeling. So she defines anger as the honorable sentry.
mhm,
So our anger is like the sentry, right? Like the person who walks the perimeter and knows the edges of our castle, our personal power, and says that is a violation, or you are entering into my personal power, and that's not okay with me. But I like this word honorable too, right? Because honor is about remaining in your dignity, remaining in your power, not being reactive or hot-headed
mhm,
with that kind of anger. We want to be honorable about asserting ourselves and advocating for ourselves. And that's also very effective especially when the other person is not being honorable, right? Because it just puts them in a position where they kind of look bad if they're not respecting your boundary. So anger, the honorable sentry, the gifts of our anger. This is important for anyone listening who's like, I don't know, like I don't want to deal with this emotion. This is not me. What do you get when you start working skillfully with your honorable sentry? So you experience more honor. You feel that sense of I am a dignified person who can stand in their power and protect themselves. A sense of conviction, right? So I know what I care about. I know what matters to me. I know what's important, and my anger helps me stay convicted around that. Um, healthy anger, channeled anger helps us feel more self aware because we know ourselves and we're able to tap into, like we were talking about our values, we're able to tap into what really matters to us. It promotes a healthy self-esteem, of course, because if we can't work healthfully and constructively with our anger, we just kind of end up being a doormat. We end up being the person that gets pushed over, or people just assume that they can just not pay us. And that continues on, and it becomes this vicious cycle of low self esteem. Um, our healthy anger, our honorable century helps us practice a healthy level of detachment from a situation. So if you are somebody who gets really triggered in conflict and you all of a sudden you're like very attached to the situation and it's stressing you out, your anger can help you take a step back. Can help you take a step back and create that healthy boundary between you and the situation so you can discern how you want to respond. And lastly, a gift of our anger is protecting ourselves and others,
mhm,
right? So in the situation with Marina's client, let's say this person's a repeat offender. They frequently do this. They hire contractors or service providers and they don't pay them. If you're the person who can stand up with a healthy, honorable anger and set that boundary, you may prevent this from happening in the future. So it helps others as well as yourself. The internal questions around anger. So the internal questions are, what do I value and what must be protected and restored? So if you're feeling that anger come up inside yourself, you want to say, what is the value here? Like Marina was suggesting that exercise. And what is my anger needing? What is my anger protecting me from? And how do I restore a sense of honor and dignity and power within myself by channeling this emotion? Um, So, in a way, anger is very tied to justice. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the times where my anger becomes more about a past wound than the actual situation. I think this is where sometimes people get a little bit hung up with anger, where they feel I don't know. This happens to me sometimes where I get really angry about something. And the more I sit with that anger, I realize it's not about the situation at all, right? It's not about the other person. It's just triggering something older, right? And I think this is where sometimes things get a little bit murky, right? It's not so obvious because the anger isn't actually telling you how to deal with that specific situation. It's actually just showing you something that hasn't been healed within you.
Mhm.
And I think this is a fear for many women, right? That I'm overreacting, right? Because when that happens, a lot of times in the moment, this doesn't make sense that I'm angry about this, right? And I say that very loosely, right? This doesn't make sense that I'm angry because, you're entitled to your anger, right? No matter what it is.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that that's a sign, right? When we get angry but we can't logically understand why in that situation, that it's maybe about something else. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that. Because I think it's a little trickier to work with sometimes.
Hmm. Can you restate the question? Because I'm not following you on what exactly you're asking.
Yeah, so I've had times where there are situations like this, right, that we've been talking about where anger tells you that a boundary has been crossed,
Mhm.
right? Um, I've had situations where anger tells me a boundary has been crossed, but the more that I sit with it, the more I realize that it's not actually a boundary was crossed. It's just reminding me of a past situation, right? Almost like I'm perceiving a threat that where there is one, or sorry, where there isn't a threat, right? So for instance, like you and I have had times where this has happened, right? Where I've misunderstood you. Where, your intentions were true and were pure, but they were reminding me of a situation in the past where a boundary really was crossed, right? And I'd never healed it. I'd never sat with it. There was this old wound, right? And those are trickier moments to work through anger because in those situations, I both had to validate my anger of like, okay, yes, this thing did happen to me in the past, and I do need to work with that and heal that. But at the same time, now that I've now that I can see clearly and the anger has dissipated, I can understand that no wrong was done in this situation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that your anger doesn't necessarily have to signal that a boundary is being crossed. I think what it can signal is that, somebody is maybe getting close to something that's tender, right?
Mhm.
Poking on a wound, and that is a boundary cross, even if that's not their intention.
Mm.
Mhm. There's a difference between, like, somebody's actively threatening me, and I feel angry and I need to respond, and somebody is not intentionally trying to threaten me, but they're still encroaching, or they're getting really close to something that I haven't fully worked through.
Yeah, totally.
Um,
Like in those situations, you've actually helped me with this because you've asked, do you have a request? And that's an aspect of boundary work is like, you know, and I think this is in nonviolent communication as well, right? Like kind of stating how you're feeling and maybe asking, like making a request of the other person. Are you able to do this in the future? Right? Are you able to meet my boundary or not? Right? Um, and I think in situations where maybe I'm triggered by it. Maybe I'm feeling angry, but at the end of the day, I actually don't have a request to make. Maybe I've realized, oh, like this wasn't a boundary cross for me. I'm not making a request of you. I don't need you to treat me differently moving forward. But now I knowing that this is triggering something else I need to look at and I need to do some healing around. So, I feel like that's the difference, right? When there's, like, that really obvious boundary cross where, you're making a request of someone around how you want to be treated, or a situation where, you're just feeling triggered by it because it's bringing something else up.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, there are different layers, I think, to this. So when you're in a conflict and you're needing to stand up for yourself and you're feeling that healthy anger coming forward, there may be different things that you need to do. So I think first is just embodiment. Really, like if you're feeling a lot of heat and a lot of pressure and stress in your body, that's where you need to take a second. Hand on the heart, take a few deep breaths. Try to stay in your body and try not to, dissociate. There are various nervous system tools that you can use to do that. Um, Once you've moved through the initial sort of trigger or nervous system response, that's when you can sit and think about, Marina, you named nonviolent communication. Um, I think one of the things that we're afraid of with anger is that we're going to be violent or we're going to use it for, like we were saying, the flamethrower. And I don't think sensitive people, like that's one of our concerns is we don't want to be hurtful in return if someone's being hurtful towards us. We have that value around not causing harm or being empathetic. Um, so nonviolent communication is all about knowing what your needs are, and being able to communicate that with this person in a way that does not cause harm. Um, and it's kind of a sophisticated practice. There's some great teachers on YouTube that you can learn about this from. There's also a great book by the man who founded this technique, Marshall Rosenberg. Um, but the thing that I've found the most helpful, when I'm feeling angry and I know I need to advocate for myself is what Marina said, like identifying my need and then making a request. Um, Making a really clear request. So I'll give an example from my own life recently. I signed a lease, on an apartment recently, and then some things came to light where I realized that this was not a good fit. And I needed to email the landlord and first clarify a few things because I wanted to give the landlord a chance to explain themselves. And when they replied, their answer was not satisfactory to me. So I needed to make a request nonviolently and clearly. And I basically just said, I'm ready. I'm withdrawing from this lease. Please let me know when I can get a refund on my security deposit. It wasn't angry. It wasn't reactive. It was just a very clear request. Um, so that's something you want to practice as you start working with your anger is how can I channel this in a way that doesn't make me like a hothead? Because if you feel like that's what it's bringing up for you, you're going to struggle to stay with that. Um, so nonviolent communication is key. And then we also want to have some ways to channel our anger after it has been activated. So maybe for you, that's kickboxing, like going to do a workout, like kind of getting some of that extra energy off because anger is a very pointed emotion. It's very focused on defining the boundaries around you, right? It's almost sentry. So whether that's moving your body or like writing in a notebook or like scribbling on a piece of paper or just like maybe putting a voice to your anger with people that you trust, like telling your friends about it. And then like when when she came to our group chat, we were dropping like memes and stuff of like flames and Rihanna, like my money. So, like, go to your community, find a way to channel it so that that anger doesn't stay inside of you and kind of, like, take over your nervous system. Do you have any other suggestions, Marina, on how to channel your anger after you've
Mhm.
processed it?
I think you've mentioned most of my favorites. The angry letter is very helpful for me, because I often have, like, 5,000,000 conversations ruminating in my head when I'm angry of, like, what I could say, what they might say, what I might say, what I should have said, and it's, like, so overwhelming, so I often will just write an angry, like, unedited letter to this person and just let it be what it is, right? Not judging yourself, this is a letter you're going to tear up. No one's ever gonna see it. You can burn it, you can tear it up. So it's a chance to let out some of that anger and know that you're not causing harm. Like you might say something in this letter that you would never say to this person because it's not in alignment with your values, but sometimes you just have to get it out of your system. So just
Mhm.
writing it, getting it onto paper, and then tearing it up. Going for a walk, I often feel a lot of anxiety paired with anger, so I usually feel really restless and like I can't sit still. So for me, going for like a brisk walk is really helpful. Um, and honestly, one of my favorite things is just putting on some angry music.
Yeah.
Like I was just like shuffling through my playlist and it was Misery Business by Paramore that came on, and she just, like, has so much power in her voice, and, like, the lyrics didn't really have anything to do with what I was dealing with, but the power behind it and her sort of, like, Paramore has this very, like she has kind of an angry energy sometimes, but it's really beautiful. Um, and of course, like, I knew all the words, so I could just open my throat and just, like, have that throat chakra experience of just, like, angry yelling. But if you're in your car, like, you're sa there's definitely a few times where I'm like, "I need to pull over because I am way too, like, amped up right now." But yeah, that definitely helps me.
Yeah, the one last thing I'll add, so this is actually a practice that Carla McLaren gives for channeling any emotion. It's called burning contracts.
I love
Mhm. Yeah, it's a visualization practice. You could probably do this with like an actual piece of paper. If you close your eyes and you bring the situation to mind, like let's just say the client not paying you, and you bring that to mind, and in your mind, you roll out a parchment paper or canvas, whatever resonates for you, or piece of stone. And onto that canvas or blank space, you throw or flame throw whatever it is about that situation that you need to get out, that you need to channel onto something else so that it's out in front of you instead of inside you. And you can do this in a myriad of ways. Like you want to do it in a way that helps you process. So if you're angry, you might like huck something against your piece of paper or your parchment, or maybe you put it in spitball it through a straw or something. Like you just want to do it in a way that helps you feel and also externalize the emotion. There's no time limit on this. You just do it until you feel like you've really gotten the situation out in front of you. And then in your mind, you just imagine destroying that parchment. You can watch it burn down into ashes. You can make it explode. You can tear it up in your mind's eye. You can crumple it in a ball and throw it at the person. However you want to approach.
At the person, not at the person.
I mean, it's your imagination. Do what feels good. If you don't want to do that to the actual person. But yeah, so this practice is called burning contracts, and you can do this with any emotion, but I think it's especially helpful with anger.
Yeah. I've heard a similar one where it's like you get an actual rock and you just stand there and you do that kind of visualization. Like for me, when I'm angry, I feel like my whole aura is like red, like pulsing.
Like in
And
the
I just
that
sit with it.
movie.
And I'm like, yes, like I feel this. And I just imagine like putting it all into that rock and then you just huck it as far as you can. Obviously not at anything, right? Like be very be very careful where you throw this rock. But yeah, just like throwing it out of your energy, out of your space.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're almost at an hour, so I wanna bring us home. We've talked about a lot. We've talked about, the nervous system states that conflict and standing up for ourselves can bring up. We've talked about the emotion of anger, what it connects to, how to channel it. What else have we talked about? Um, yeah, just the kinds
Some
of
of our personal experiences.
yeah, our personal experiences with self-advocacy and standing in our power. Um, yeah, so I wanna mention because one of the reasons that we're bringing Marina here on this conversation series is she's one of our facilitators inside the collective, and she runs a biweekly circle, the Self Alchemy for Sensitive Self Healers Co-working Circle. And this group runs every 2 weeks. We have our second one tonight. Um, and it's a space to basically come and do this kind of work, whether it's working on your boundaries, learning how to process your emotions in a healthy way. We talked about nonviolent communication, practicing that skill, energetic grounding, nervous system safety, um, tools and tips and tricks for clearing your energy is like an abundant well of tips for that kind of thing. How to tap into your intuition, how to connect with your self compassion. The topic list is just endless for this co-working circle, and Marina is like a little honey badger for this. She just loves teaching all the things that she learns and the stuff that she picks up with working with her clients. So we have our circle tonight. Marina, do you want to share a little bit about what you're doing in circle tonight?
Yeah, so we are going to be practicing a little bit of mindfulness to start out. We touched on this a little bit just, today talking about anger and how being an observer can be really helpful, especially when you're feeling that heightened nervous system response. So we're going to practice a little bit of mindfulness, probably just maybe 5 or 10 minutes, nothing too long. And then we are doing some self alchemy. So last week we identified our inner a part of ourselves that's ready to be alchemized, and we're going to be working with that a little bit more. So tonight we're going to do some love letter writing, which I know Leah loves. So we're going to be writing some letters to our of ourselves, whether it's that part that's ready to be alchemized or a past or future self. If anyone's feeling really excited about 2026 and wants to connect with that future self, they're welcome to do that as well. I'm going to give the group a couple different options, so it'll be kind of a choose your own adventure, and then, yeah, of course, I like to also tune in with the group and see what everyone's kind of feeling. So it'll be a little bit intuitive as well.
Yeah. So for those listening who are maybe interested in joining this circle, let me see if I can address some of the questions people might have. This is not like a trauma dumping circle, where people come and talk about their issues and it feels overwhelming. This is a community circle. And we have Marina as our guide. So she is facilitating that space. She's holding it. She's walking and guiding us through the experience. She's coming with reflection questions and tools and practices for us. Um, in our circles in general, so we run these every 2 weeks in the collective. Um, it's really come as you are. There's nothing very formal about it. Like, come in your PJs and your cozy sweaters. You can leave your camera on or off. We're pretty casual about this. If you need to go get a snack or get up and move around, you're free to do that. It really is just a meeting of souls and friends every 2 weeks, which is a very grounding rhythm. At least that's what I've found in my experience of attending and also hosting these circles. It's like a little touch point with people that are doing work together and people that you also know as friends and community. Would you add anything else about what we kind of like the vibe or what happens in Sanctuary Circle?
Yeah, I think it's just perfect for anyone who wants to do some inner work in community. That's really what it's all about. We all come with different experiences and different goals and different perspectives, but we're just, supporting each other, and yeah, doing some of this inner work together. This inner work can be deep sometimes, especially, that shadow work, the self alchemy work. So it's nice to not have to do it alone, but at the same time, you have the autonomy of, this is what I want to work on today. This is where I'm going to take things, so it doesn't feel too like stifling. If you want to kind of go with your own flow and tune in with yourself, there's space for that.
Yeah, definitely. And Marina's available if you have questions or you need some kind of personal advice or suggestions. She's done a lot of work around this, but the intention of the circle is not where we have like one person who's in charge and they're like the expert. It's more like we're all growing together and one of us is holding the space. Um, you won't receive any unsolicited advice unless you ask for it. We really try to respect personal boundaries around that. And Yeah, I mean, I think that's if anyone has any questions about our circles and you wanna attend, but you're like, "I don't know, I have some questions first," just send us a message and we're happy to, um, answer those questions for you. So, couple of the details, if you wanna join us tonight or in 2 weeks or really any of our upcoming circles, they happen every 2 weeks. Marina has her circle tonight, and then she'll have it again in 2 weeks, and then I have mine on alternating weeks, and we have different themes for the circles that I host. If you are currently a member of the Nourish Sensitive Collective, you get access to all of our circles as part of your membership. Um, if you're not a member, you can still join. We keep it open. There's a ticketed price, and if you're a first timer, you can join us for with the coupon code First Circle Free. You just want to come try it out. But otherwise, it's drop in if you don't want to be a member and attend all of our circles. And yeah, we would love to have you. And yeah, is there anything else you want to say about Circle Marina?
No, I'm just excited. I'm really enjoying it. I feel like we're really getting some momentum going. At the same time, if you're new to the group, we'll get you on board, we'll get you all settled in, and yeah, hope to see some new faces soon.
All right, so let's close our conversation. Just take a deep breath. Anyone who's here, in through the nose, and extend your exhale out the mouth. Maybe one more. And we're just acknowledging the courage that it takes to feel all of our feelings and express our needs in healthy ways. We're acknowledging the courage that it takes to stand up for ourselves, set healthy boundaries, and also the wonderful possibilities and gifts when we're able to do that. Is there anything you want to leave our audience with, Marina?
Just thank you for joining us. Thank you for being open, ready to learn. I feel like that's 90% of it, honestly. Just being ready to soak it up like a sponge and put it into practice in small ways. So you're already doing it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this conversation. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another topic. And we invite you to leave a comment um, on the post in the chat if you have any questions about anything we talked about today. Ciao.
Bye, Leah. Bye, everyone.